looks like it's the top of the hour. I'll give people a few minutes, but I think we're ready to start. And thanks all for showing up. I know this is sort of a wacky time, but we did it to for the authors, mostly for the authors, because it's much more prevalent for their time zone. So thanks for sticking in there, folks. Dnsop Interim, you know us. Benno is sleeping, so let us not wake him. And Paul, it looked like you showed up, Paul. Will you be able to take minutes for a little bit? Will that be good?
Yeah, I'll do the normal. I'll even be more abbreviated, but I'll do the normal of just the conversation, not
exactly.
Presentation.
Yep. And you'll see we've just got some questions that I think mostly we're just trying to get some answers on. So appreciate that. Thank you.
I thought you might ask. I already have the text file open.
Okay. Thanks.
Terrific. Thanks, Paul.
The note well. So all about. I think most of us have been there. So what we say is public. So speak carefully. Our agenda is pretty straightforward, and we'll try to jump into it. First, Mr. Fujimura is going to talk about avoid fragmentation, and we really there's two questions that come up. He's got a couple of slides, but mostly, is it can we pick a single value or a range of values? And is one preferable to the other? And is one, where can we go from that? And then the second question is, if it's a range of values, what are those appropriate values, singular or plural? So, and then the second one, and these are both like 30-minute slots, so we'll see how they go. The glue is not optional. There's two sort of open questions. I think the first one's really been answered. What to say about orphan glue, and then is sibling glue optional or required? And Schumann and Dwayne have a couple of slides to kind of run through that, and some good questions there. So we'll keep it simple and straightforward, and we'll jump right into that. I've just got to. How do I pick? Now I can't remember how to pick.
All right. You looking to start the preloaded?
Yes.
Presentation? Okay, that's the second from the left and the icons
That's right.
at the top.
I keep clicking the other one.
I know, this is such a new and wonderful feature. Soon we will forget we never had. We will forget we ever didn't have it.
No, come on. I'm failing.
Let me see if it works for me.
Okay.
It's telling somebody owns the.
I just gave it up.
Okay, let's see what we got here. All right, avoid fragmentation.
There you go.
There.
Wow. There we go.
All right, and I guess that means I have to run the slides, but that's.
Yeah. So, Mr. Fujiwara-san, the floor is yours, sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, this is Kazunori Fujiwara from JPRS. I will talk about draft Ietf Dnsop avoid fragmentation 05. Next slide, please. This page shows summary of 05. In introduction, fragmented DNS UDP responses have systematic weakness, and the draft proposes recommendations for UDP responders and recommendations for UDP requesters. UDP requesters should send DNS responses with IP or IP version 6.flag options. UDP requesters may probe to discover the real MTU value per destination. UDP responders should compose UDP responses fit in pass MTU or good value. And UDP requesters should send DNS responses with IP or IP version 6 don't flag options. UDP requesters should use the requester's payload size as calculated or good value. And good value is chosen from 1220, 1232, 1400, 1472, 1452, or measured. And the draft contains additional text, minimal responses, IPMT gets the COPS trace paths. Next slide, please. This table shows default maximal DNS UDP payload size, or good value. RFC 4035 specified 1220. DNS flag date 2020 proposed 1232. Author's recommendation is 1400. And maximum case 1472 for IP version 4 and 1452 for IP version 6. And the measured case MTU size minus IP or IP version 6 header size minus UDP header size. Next slide, please. And Hayashi Liman et al. Published a new paper, DNS over TCP considered vulnerable, at Applied Network Research Workshop 2021, July 28 this year. ICMP attack targets are intermediate routers between resolvers and authoritative servers. They show that some routers accept ICMP version 4 fragmentation needed and DF set to resolvers. And 496 of Alexa top 100,000 domains are vulnerable to fragmentation over TCP attacks. And how to measure? At Ietf 111, there is a comment. 0.5% is small and they attacks. And at ANRW, I cannot get a clear answer about IP version 6 and who is vulnerable. Fragmentation does not happen on IP version 6 at intermediate routers, and recent TCP implementation support RFC 4821 packetization layer PassMT discovery and set IPDF don't fragment bit on IP version 4 TCP packets. The DF bit should be set on the fragments quoted from section 8 of RFC 4821. And I checked some root servers and JPDN servers, and they set IPDF bit on IP version 4 TCP response packets. Then I think it is a trivial issue. And authors will add text and reference to the paper at weakness of IP fragmentation section. Next slide, please. And discussions at the Ietf and discussions about Ietf 111. Paul Hoffman mentioned that he expected a single value in a BCP document, while Victor is fine with a set of values. Next slide, please.
There you go.
Questions. There is a questions. First, can we agree with a set of good UDP sizes rather than a single value? And what are the good values? Is it possible to prove good values per destination at UDP requester? For example, packetized layer PassMT discovery RC8899 or Bind9's way. Bind9 sends at first 512 and then 1,000 or similar value, and then specified large value. Our concern is that when these sites are under tunnels and their MTU are small, Standardizing a large value with IPTF, IP don't flag will prevent communications. Some VPN appliances offer default MTU size 1280. This such case, software may probe MTU size to the internet and generate good value. Next slide, please. Probing good values. If complexity, path-empty discovery, and insecurity, TCP or UDP vulnerability are to be avoided above all else, then a small audience buffer size should be offered. For example, 220 or 1232. If network efficiency, both now and in the future, is to be maximized, then adaptive retry after single failure, adaptive retry after silent failure should be done, beginning with a large value and trying small values, or beginning with small value and trying large values, similar to packet path-empty discovery, RC8899 or Binance way. In all cases, fragmentation either by an endpoint or gateway must be avoided. In a definite future, something like packet layer path-empty discovery and its attendant complexity and state cost will be necessary to take advantage of vastly large path-empty of the future. That's all. And please,
Thanks. Can we go back one slide, Suzanne?
Yep.
Yeah, the good questions. Okay, let's start off with the first question. I want to hear what people think about, a set of good sizes or a single value. I thought the table in this deck was actually very good. It was a very good way to sort of lay it all out for folks. So I'd like to hear, we'd like to hear some folks on that. Go ahead, Brian.
It might be valuable to give consideration to the sizes in which direction from the authority server versus the resolver to the authority versus the client to the resolver or the resolver to the client. They might be, even if we pick a single size, they might be different sizes for different reasons. We'll talk about that in a bit, but that's just my first comment.
Okay, thanks. Paul?
So this is Paul Hoffman. If we want a set of sizes, which it sounds like we want, because as you said, Tim, this table is fairly good for the different reasons. And as Kazunori said, in the future, like you don't even know if you want to start low and count high or count high and go low with different use cases. I think we can do that. I think it's just then not a BCP. It's an informational document with lots of good information. The reason why I asked, is this a best current practice? It's a set of best current practices with no definitive guidelines. So I think I would agree that the 5 numbers in the current draft are all good.
Okay, thanks. Warren, can I get your take on that sort of BCP versus informational? That's a good point, Paul. And yes, I think the table should almost go into the document in some format, because it really sort of lays it all out for folks.
So yeah, this is Warren. I mean, that seems like a fairly reasonable idea, but I think it will need some text messaging and stuff so be clear what exactly the
it is in the document. Never mind.
BCP part is.
So,
but I mean, it doesn't seem like a bad idea to me. In fact, it seems like a great idea to me. And I'm assuming you did call on me. So
I did call on you
hopefully
actually.
it's not-
Yes, and I thank you for that. And I apologize. It is in the document. For some reason, when I looked at the document yesterday, I did not see it, but I was distracted. So I'm sorry, Mr. Cousin. So, okay, I guess that would be sort of that would be the only thing I would sort of think about. And so the authors, we can think about that and sort of chew on that. That would be that sort of take. Okay. Paul, do you want to go now? You're still in the queue. Are you? Okay, Mr. Dickinson? Miss Dixon?
Dickinson's are a different thing.
Yeah, I know.
I definitely have an opinion that this needs to be a BCP. And if, in order to make it a BCP, we have some recommended values and a single must not exceed value, I think that might split the difference. And I definitely think either 1472 or 1452. We don't want to go too low in what the must not exceed is, for reasons that I think Jeff Houston has previously in presentations shown, that if you go too low, there are other bad things that start to happen.
Yep.
But you definitely do want to make it a BCP so that everyone realizes, no, this is really, really important. I have not yet written up some example tests that I've done a long time ago, for reasons that had to do with not wanting to give information to bad people that would allow them to actually do bad things. But I think it's probably overdue that I actually write up some examples of just how that it can be informally and maybe shared amongst like the OARC or the Dnsop folks.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, anyway.
Yep. Peter, you're up very late. Or very early.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Hi, good morning. Peter Koch here. I on the one versus list of values, I could live with a single value as a default recommendation to software vendors, but I think operators need a bit more leeway and be able to apply certain considerations, which brings me to the second issue of, does it have to be a single value if it is going to be BCP? I don't buy that connection. The good practice is actually applying these considerations. So following an advice that makes operators be able to pick from a set of values for good reasons seems perfectly fine for BCP to me. Thank you.
And I guess we'd have to, for those reasons, we'd have to sort of list what, if you pick 1232, what is the logic behind that, basically? Essentially is what you're saying.
Yeah, kind of. Thanks.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Warren, are you still in there?
So two things. I mean, I fully agree with Peter that it does not need to have just a specific number to be a BCP. In fact, I think it would be useful if it had a, if your network looks like this, choose this number, or follow this sort of set of steps to figure out what number is the right one for you. But the original reason I got in the queue was to say, it makes much more sense to ask for BCP. And if, at ISG eval time, people decide, yeah, it seems more like informational, it can easily be downgraded. But if you ask for informational, it's never going to get upgraded. So
that's true. Yep.
Ask for BCP, and the worst that happens is it doesn't make it, but I think it just seems well within the BCP realm.
Okay. So, and go ahead, Mark.
My browser decided it needed to ask more permissions. I put up a draft a while back about well-known TSIG. It's currently expired, but we can all read it. That, as a mechanism, will defeat every single fragmentation reassembly attack there is, be it TCP or UDP. We should really be looking at that if we're not encrypting looking at moving servers to using something like that, rather than setting do not fragment on UDP. Do not fragment on UDP leads to black holes. We do not have control of every router and every link MTU in the internet. Why don't we don't need to go and have a whole heap of TCP options being set just to prevent reassembly attacks succeeding. We can do this at the UDP, at the DNS layer rather than the IP layer. The IP layer really is a mess for developers. Every OS has different sets of options. They don't all work. I'd like the working group to look at evaluating the well-known TSIG as a solution to this, please.
Okay, thanks.
Mark, if you had a draft along those lines, it
It's
might
there.
be.
Is that
It's
the
there.
defeat frag attack draft from
There's-
2019?
There's a defeat fragment attack. I think it's called defeat fragment attack.
Yep.
Fragment attack. It exists.
Yep, I just pasted the link
I
in
just
the
use, I just
into
the
the
one
chat.
change I'd make in it is use all ones rather than all zeros
So
as the default key.
cool. I found it and put it in the chat. The archive version. So
What we're looking here in terms of values here, they're good for not having. If you want something and you're going to get it through a firewall that drops fragmented packets, these values are good for that.
okay.
But if you know your firewall passes fragmented packets, these are just wasting, just causing you to switch to TCP much too early. There's nothing wrong with having these as a default value and probing upwards all the way up to 4K. But if you want to actually defeat fragmentation attacks, allow the network to work properly. People don't, most sites don't actually block fragmented UTP over IPv4, and fragmentation being dropped over IPv6 was due initially to FreeBSD thinking that there was never going to be a fragmented packet over IPv6. But yeah, so there's the bad firewalls, and we can probe into them. But if you want, you can defeat reassembly attacks using crypto, and that whether it's just cryptographic checksums or it's encryption itself.
Okay. Okay, thanks. I do have a question, and this may be going back to Paul about the single choice. If the authors had a single recommendation in there, like here's our table, but we recommend this, like their 1,400 numbers, right? Does that appease you, or does that muddy the waters more? And I'll take Brian first, and then we'll take Paul. How's that? Okay, go ahead, Brian.
1452, I think, would be a reasonable upper number to use. 1472 is the biggest you would expect from IPv4, but excludes the possibility that it goes over any tunnels. 1452 is likely to get through even the biggest single tunnel or a couple of intermediate, smaller type tunnels. So to answer your question, one sort of tangential question I have to potentially add in to this is, what should an authority server put in its UDP buff size? Should it be putting in the largest value that it will accept, or what it's like what it's configured with, since it's answering, but it has that value available to put in so that clients can learn, rather than just putting in some canned value like some implementations do. So that's a separate question. Maybe it doesn't need to be answered now, but it's a thought. I think something to think about. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Paul?
So to answer your question of should we also have a recommended size? If we can't back up the recommended size with anything more than here's what the authors think, then no, because I think the other numbers in the table all are backed up reasonably well. And I'm not saying that, I'm looking here, author's recommendation of 1400 is bad, but it's not backed up with the kind of data that that the other ones are. So if they could add that, if they could say, why is 1400 better than the other, or why would an operator consider 1400, specifically 1400 over the others? But I think with the current table, and of course the explanation of the table, an operator could look at that, you know, going back to my question of is this a BCP, and say, well, there's a bunch of choices to make, but I have enough information to make the choices, other than for that one author recommendation.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there,
No,
Paul, but I have a thought here that might help us a little bit. I like what Paul was saying, but also it occurs to me that we might be looking at this slightly backwards, in the sense that the BCP that we are quite firmly recommending is don't just blindly pick a number. And the rest of the document goes very clearly to defending the proposition that good practice consists of examining the discussion in the document, examining what your particular use cases and your particular concerns are, and framing it that way. It seems to me that it's easier to call it a best current practice, and it's also easier to say, in the most common cases, 1452 is often the best value to use, you know, is often a good value. The reasons why we would consider these others include the following. But the thing it seems we're most trying to promote here is thoughtful examination of the issues rather than any specific answer. And see if thinking of it that way helps. No comments on that at all.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead, Brian.
I would
We'll leave it at
concur
that.
with what Suzanne said. I think she put it very concisely. So yeah.
And the draft does sort of spell out operators of authoritative servers, resolvers, and then clients such as stub resolvers, but maybe it's not, they need to be broken out a little bit and made a little bit more obvious. And that's something we can chat with the authors about, but it's, yes, I think there is some discussion about the various if you're this person, you should look at it this way. If you're that person, you should look at it that way. So, okay. We're going to try to summarize this and take it to the mailing list, and we'll probably, we'll go for a vote on this and see where things go. And hopefully we'll come up with a good question. We'll come up with questions that we can get answered one way or the other, and can move this forward, because we do think this is really good stuff. But thanks for all this. So those are some good comments, and thanks for all of you.
And who is presenting the next one? Dwayne? Yeah, Dwayne, I'll stop sharing, and you can share yours if you want.
Oh, okay.
Or share, you mean share it to him?
Yeah, we can do it either way, Dwayne. If you want to do the slide share, that's okay. I can also do that one if you want.
It's all
Let me
wacky
see if I can
technology.
figure it out.
Yeah, we may fail on that. So, but thank you all. That was good, and I think I feel a little confused now, but I think it's okay, because I think once I think about it, it'll make more sense. And just there was good. Yep. So.
Okay. Dwayne, you want me to go ahead and do the slides?
You can. Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I click the slide request button, but I don't know what happens next.
Well, the share preloaded slides button should give you a list. Well, here, let me do it.
Okay.
When you click the button, a list of available presentations appears, and
I couldn't
here we
figure it out,
are.
so
Glue not optional. Yeah, I just reviewed the tutorial this afternoon because I had forgotten how to make it work also. Can folks see the opening slide of glue not optional?
I can see it.
Awesome.
All right, so this is a
Whenever you're
pretty short slide deck. We've just got 3 slides, and this, of course, is about the draft whose title is close to what's on the screen, but it's glue is not optional. So next slide, please.
There you go.
So one of the issues that we talked about previously was about whether or not to include orphan glue in this draft. And I think we heard loud and clear from people, and the authors agree that we should just remove orphan glue from the draft to not complicate things too much. So that would be our proposal going forward. Next slide. This one will be a little bit more involved. So this issue is about requirements around sibling glue. And so the draft has a sentence in there that says a name server blank include all sibling glue or set TC equal 1. And the discussion is whether blank should be filled in with must or should. I think the current posted version of the draft says must, and some of the discussion we had after the last meeting was that it instead should be should. Some of the reasons that you might want to have a must there is that sibling glue is probably required if you want to resolve a name where there's what I would call a sibling glue loop, where one name has a sibling glue that refers to another domain, and that domain then refers back to the first, or maybe even more complicated loops. Another argument is that you might want to provide the most complete set of name server addresses as possible, because an authoritative server may want to provide the most complete set because it doesn't know which set of the delegated name servers are actually working at any given time. You might also consider that more of an optimization than rather a robustness requirement. The reasons for should is that technically sibling glue is not really required for resolution, except for the loop case as mentioned above. A name server can query, can issue a second query for sibling glue if it's needed, and that it's likely or possible that functionality already exists today. That's already something that resolvers have to do to get glue that might be missing. And based on the discussion on the mailing list, my read of that discussion was that most people felt that should was maybe more appropriate here. So we want to have further discussion on that and maybe try to reach a decision on that, hopefully. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, which will be related to the first. Issue 3, something that we've talked about as the authors, is should the draft mention or accommodate the idea of sibling glue loops? Should there be an example showing what such a loop looks like? And does the working group feel that a configuration, a real world configuration with sibling glue loops is something that should be supported and reasonably expected to work, or is it broken and anomalous and not something that we should enable? So those two questions are what we are asking for feedback on, or really the three, I guess, any of those three. And that's it for the slide deck.
Yep. Thanks, Dwayne. And wow, we have quite a queue already.
All right.
And I think it's pretty clear which issues we need to discuss. I don't see an easy way to separate these, so I think we should just go ahead and comment on either any of the sibling glue questions here. So go ahead, Brian. We're not?
Of linguistics or precision in the wording. I think it's what we should be, what the intent should be is, if you don't include sibling glue, you must set TC equal 1. And if you get a TCP query, you must include sibling glue. That's the only way to resolve sibling glue loops. But I think that would be a reasonable approach, allowing the cases where it's not necessary, the sibling glue is not necessary to resolve. But if there's a resolution failure, that there's a way around the problem that is encoded in this document. That's basically it.
So Brian, are you arguing for must then?
Arguing for a must, but in a refined wording of that, to allow for may be omitted, but must set TC equal 1.
It does say that. So I mean, can you go back one slide, Suzanne?
Yep. There.
So the first bullet here says, it's quoted from the draft. So a name server must include all sibling glue or set TC equal 1. That's what it currently says.
Yeah. So maybe make it much more definitive using the logical XOR. It has to be one or the other, or maybe just make it very, very, very clear. So yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Okay. Ben, I guess, is next.
Hi, Ben Schwartz. I would prefer I think the DNS is confusing enough without name server cycles. I would prefer language maybe here that makes explicit that name server that zone operators must not construct cyclic name server relationships like sibling glue loops, and that basically, that if they do, the authoritative server is free to reject this in some fashion, treat this as an invalid configuration. On the topic of setting TC equal to 1, issue 2, I'd like a little more clarification on whether this is intended to be a performance optimization, because it seems like it's not an effective performance optimization. If any of this glue is not actually required, you are better off getting, essentially just making the follow-up query and getting the additional records you need, rather than repeating the query over TCP.
Ben, setting TC equals 1 is not an optimization. It is ensuring that the recursive server gets enough information to actually perform the next query. That's whether it be the sibling glue case or the traditional standard 13 case of definition of glue.
So I'm a little confused about this. It seems like in the sibling glue case, you can follow up and get the glue in response to a subsequent query. So if you don't have all the glue you need, you can then make an additional query.
Then you may be able to follow up and get the glue you. You may succeed. If there's a loop in there, if there is a loop there, the resolution will fail.
Yes, but I
If you
want
can't fit
resolution
it
to
in
fail in
and
that
you don't
case, because I
force
view
it
that
to
as an
TCP
invalid
to give you enough
configuration.
space.
One at a time, please.
Sorry. Yes, I understand that that setting TC equals 0 in this case will cause resolution to fail for a sibling glue loop. I'm saying that we should make it fail. This is not a valid configuration.
Paul, go ahead, please.
So if this becomes a should, then section 3, which is the actual replacement text for RFC 1034, doesn't work, because there is no concept of sibling in RFC 1034. So, and the suggested text for RFC 1034 is you must set the TC equals 1 bit. And so, again, if the working group wants to go for should, then that will make the replacement text in 1034 much more complicated. For that reason, I'm happy with a must.
John, go ahead.
I actually have a wording question for that same sentence where it says, if all glue RRs do not fit, set TC equals 1. And English is wonderfully ambiguous. I think you mean that it has to, that if there are n RRs and you can only fit n-1 truncated, but a reasonable English reading would be that it's okay to include at least one. So I hope this means that you need to include all of them, and I think you should fix the wording to make that clearer. And as far as with respect to sibling glue, Ben said what I was going to say. I don't think we should encourage something that doesn't work in general. I would prefer must not.
Would all available glue records be better wording? Adding the word available or something like that?
I would make the sentence longer. I would say like the response must include all glue records. If it's not possible to include all glue records, then set TC equals 1 or something like that. I know what you mean, and I think it's confusing. So I think it's worth adding more words to make it more idiot resistant, since we all know that I'm not the only idiot.
Yeah, it should be possible to fix that with just a couple of words. But yeah,
So
I understand what
I mean, there obviously are more words in the draft than on this slide. So, and it is our intention. It is the the draft intends what you're saying, John. So, let's look at the exact words, and if you want to recommend some,
I just read the exact words. It says if all glue RRs do not fit, set TC equals 1. And again, in English, that's ambiguous. So I think we all know, since there appears to be no disagreement about what we mean, so it means so. Please fix it.
Yeah, we can propose some revised wording, and it's just section 3, the updates to RFC 1034.
Yeah, if we keep sibling glue, then there's you should probably fix that too. But of course, I hope you take sibling glue out altogether.
If you must do it, here's how to do it without shooting yourself in the foot. Warren, speak to us.
Thank you. Hopefully mine's nice and easy. Your very last slide has a question on should there be an example? And I think regardless of whether or not, we say that sibling glue is reasonable or not, I think it would be useful to have an example just to explain what it is. It's like, here's an example, don't do this.
So to be a little bit more clear, Warren, the draft, and maybe not the one that's published, but the work in progress draft does have an example of sibling glue. Yep. It does not have an example of a sibling glue loop, however.
Sorry, yes, I meant loop.
Okay.
And I think it would be useful to just, so people understand what the words mean and what they're talking about, but yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Dwayne, I'd agree with that, just for the purpose of letting people walk through why it's a bad idea and where the broken shards will fall if they try it.
Okay.
Brian.
Sympathetic to the concept of getting rid of sibling glue loops. Notwithstanding code bases and zones, there is a heck of a lot of deployed stuff out there that may never get updated or may get updated slowly. And that includes both the software for supporting authority servers as well as the zone configurations themselves. And we're talking about potentially arbitrarily deep in the DNS tree. So the stuff that I think Ben may have been thinking about is mostly at the TLD to second level. That's probably fine to really point people to say, you shouldn't be doing this, but I don't think it's feasible to just say, okay, if you don't have things done right, your stuff's going to break. I don't think that's an appropriate direction for the working group to take. But I think it's fine to say, let's allow removal of sibling glue with the TC equals 1 done, even if both the sibling glue and the regular glue would fit. If you decide in your implementation to remove the sibling glue, you have to set TC equals 1. Should be the specifics of what's intended there, and that would also apply if you're intending to include sibling glue, but it doesn't all fit. Set TC equals 1. I hope that those things are sufficient to disambiguate what an implementer would need to do.
Okay,
Hi, Ben Schwartz, responding to Brian. So that to add some nuance, what I think ideally we would see is a must not instruction that says don't create a loop, and a may instruction that says you may configure yourself in a way that makes these loops unresolvable on the authoritative side. And so as an authoritative server implementer, that's up to you whether you want to go go break those configurations if that simplifies things for you in some other way, or whether you want to continue supporting those out of spec configurations.
Okay, Brian.
The compatibility, interoperability. Somebody's got an echo on. Is that it should be the case that follow-up query has to always work if it's talking to an authority server that is serving up sibling glue loop, and we want to make sure that the instructions in this are compatible with that. In other words, the behavior on TCP follow-up after a UDP that gets a TC equals 1 is going to get all of the records that it needs to resolve. I think that's the only piece I really think is something I feel strongly about.
Go ahead, Paul.
I'm just going to repeat myself and reemphasize, if we want to go down that path, then the update to 1034 is going to be much longer because it has to describe what sibling glue is. The current wording is fairly clear because it just talks about glue. And we have lumped, or the draft currently lumps, sibling glue with traditional glue. If it's important enough to separate those out, then we're going to have to make this longer. I still think it'll be understandable, but just be aware that we're not then simply making a one sentence addition to 1034.
Yeah. Ben, did you have another comment also?
Just Ben Schwartz, just a quick follow-up to Brian Dixon's comment. It sounds like you're talking about the portability between implementations of zones that rely on a sibling glue loop. So I guess my view is that I don't think that portability is a very high priority.
Brian, and then I want to hear from Dwayne about what he's hearing here. Go ahead, Brian.
I was saying this interoperability, not portability. So I don't want this to cause the behavior of resolvers and authority servers to result in breakage in the case of somebody updating their software, but not updating their zones. And there could be the case, depending on where the sibling glue actually lives, it could be further down the tree than is necessarily visible to the single authority server that updates its software. I think, I'm not sure. Might need some whiteboarding to figure out if that's the case. But basically, the gist of it is we should not be imposing breakage on existing interoperability, whatever that means.
Okay. I do have two things. First, there's I have seen about half of a discussion in the chat that, and I'm going to encourage the folks talking there. If any of what you're saying or hearing should be added to the draft, please send text. Also, Dwayne, what are you getting what you need from this? Do you see a way forward out of this discussion?
No. I feel like there are two, I'm hearing both opinions, right? I'm hearing some people say that with regard to sibling glue, the requirement should be must, and some saying should. I guess I do want to express my viewpoint that today what tends to happen, I believe, in most authoritative name server implementations is that they they fit in as much glue as they can, and you know, generally don't truncate. And so, you know, I think for most resolution, and if there are cases where there's sibling loops, you know, I think those are generally working because lots of name servers support EDNS and large messages, and those generally fit. The thing that this draft will change is that if some glue records fit, but all of them do not fit, then we're going to see truncation. So I you know, I think things are going to continue to work. I think that the change is going to be, you know, we may see more TCP traffic than we saw before.
Mm-hmm. I think to some degree, some of what we've been talking about today is, I hesitate to say corner cases, but
right.
I do think that the point what you just said is the primary point of the document. So we do need to resolve these issues, but the primary message has to be clear. Brian, and then Ben, and then I think we're out of time. Brian, go ahead.
So I think there's a third case, which is if the authority server is configuring itself to be narrow glue policy, to ensure that is a different situation than the current situation of some of the sibling glue fits, but not all of it. And I think my concern is it should be permissible to implement a narrow glue policy that requires that non-sibling glue fit or be truncated for sure. It has to be served. And if there exists sibling glue that is omitted because of the narrow glue policy, that TC=1 should be also the case if it exists. And that's so that a follow-up over TCP will permit resolution of anything that involves the requirement of sibling glue to actually resolve, i.e. the loops.
Right.
So Brian, I just heard you say should, and previously I think I heard you say must.
Must, sorry.
So we need to be very clear here.
Yes.
Yes.
Must. My bad.
Indeed. And Ben gets the last word on this, and then we have to wrap up.
So I think this could all be greatly simplified by separating the two questions. One question is, what is the glue policy? And the other question is, what happens when the glue indicated by that policy doesn't fit? I think we all agree that the authoritative servers should have a glue policy and that they should determine what glue they're going to reply with and then set the truncation bit if it doesn't all fit. What that glue policy is, I think, is entirely separable and potentially doesn't really need to be specified in great detail here. If it is specified here, I think it can be, I think we can permit a range of behaviors and it doesn't interact with the question of setting the truncation bit.
That is very possibly worth pursuing. Brian, one quick last word?
Yep.
Because we
Very
really
last
are
word.
out of time.
I concur with that, except that we need to specify the behavior over TCP as potentially not being controlled by the glue policy. That's the only caveat.
Well, we will make sense of what we've heard, reminding people that there will be a recording, which I'm sure Tim and I will be listening to make sure we've heard and considered everybody's comments. And I think it'll be publicly available for anybody that wants to go over it and think further about this. Tim, do you have anything to add before we wrap?
No, I thank you for all those, and I think yes, like Suzanne said, we've got a little bit of formulating of the questions, and so we'll talk with the authors and send something to the mailing list on how to sort of move on this. So
yeah, I think we've refined the questions at least, but we will have to go another round on the mailing list.
Yep.
So Dwayne, does that sound sensible to you? To the editors?
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
I think that's the best we can do at this point.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't get an answer, but I do feel like we made progress in at least reframing the question. So, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you all.
Thanks to everybody that joined us. And I think we have made progress on both of these drafts towards being able to get them to last call. So thanks everybody. And we will see further discussion, I guess, on the mailing list.
Yep. We should have something in a couple of days for you guys, at least. That's what we hope. Yep. Or Warren will beat us. So
thanks enormously, everybody.
Thanks all.
And we are done.